What's up, everybody? Thanks for joining us. Very excited to talk about AI and banking. I think obviously a lot of us have been reading about it. Will is in the trenches building it. The CEO and co-founder of Greenlight. Will, why don't you start off by telling us a bit more about Greenlight?
Yeah, hey everyone, great to see you all. I know we've been talking a lot about AI today, so happy to spend a little bit more time on it and even talk about where we think their best applications are within banking and financial services. So I'm Will, I'm the co-founder and CEO over here at Greenlight. We build AI agents for compliance teams at financial services companies. SEC, FDIC, and OCC regulated institutions already use Greenlight to scale up their compliance as opposed to over-hiring or relying on outsourced teams. I think a theme that we'll talk a lot about today is this wave of AI that we're talking about a lot is language model driven. And language model is really good at some of those back office tasks we see across financial institutions. And I think that's where we're seeing a lot of the pull here at Greenlight, and happy to dive into that a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to hear a little bit more about some of that market pull and what you sort of think banks are looking for from potential vendors in AI and what they're looking for from a product perspective.
100%. So I think efficiency is the top theme we hear across most of the institutions that we're working with. Everyone's trying to find opportunities to improve their profitability, but also making sure that they maintain their regulatory posture. And so I think a really key area for people to be looking at is we're looking at their cost centers as a starting point. Almost the prototypical examples of generative AI involve customer success. Another one we're seeing a lot is compliance. Why are those areas of focus? It's because they're large cost centers within most financial institutions. And they're also things that rely on a large force of people to staff those operations. Those operational staff might be here in onshore, or they could be offshore. Whenever I see big pockets of individuals doing repetitive work, I think those are great opportunities for generative AI. And banking executives seem to think the same thing.
So yeah, I mean, I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you guys are actually automating that manual work. I mean, I think for those who don't know, the compliance analysts do a lot of manual research into things like knowing your customer, knowing your business. Will, you can talk ad nauseum about this, but would love to hear a little bit more about how these workflows are actually being automated and the benefits that that your clients are seeing.
Yeah, sounds great. And I'll actually share a quick story about this. Prior to Greenlight, I used to lead the product team focused on anti-money laundering at Facebook Financial. And just to share the shape of this problem in compliance, what we often see is a two-part problem. The first one is detection of compliance risks. In the anti-money laundering space, that often requires traditional machine learning methods to detect things like suspicious transaction patterns or people who might be risky for the institution to work with. That's a very traditional problem, and it's the domain of the neural networks and supervised machine learning that we've seen over the last 15 years. And that's what my team really focused on. But whenever a risk was detected, it was almost sent over this invisible fence to a human team. Those might be investigators or analysts. And when you look at their workflow, it's not nearly as sophisticated, unfortunately, as a lot of those detection tasks. Again, looking over their shoulder and answering the question Ian shared, they're following a set of standard operating procedures. That might involve things like, let's Google that customer's name. Let's review their documentation they have on file. Let's review their last 12 months of transaction activity. Working through a checklist in many ways to make sure that they can address the risk and show an audit trail of addressing that risk. And you may have heard this meme almost of AI is like a smart intern. I think we've gone past intern a little bit to almost this entry-level employee. And I think every couple of months we're moving up that scale. So it goes to the question, if you look at a financial institution, where do we see a lot of those entry-level employees? And they're in those functions where doing those standard operating procedures, execution of those standard operating procedures. So our goal at Greenlight, and what we're seeing from some of the most successful AI agent companies in our cohort here, are they're looking for big pockets of operational resources dedicated to solving almost checklist-style problems and deploying agents that can do those workflows in a more automated way. And again, because those often sit in cost centers, it drives up to this key theme of efficiency that we're seeing across financial services.
So these cost centers are being a lot more optimized. What does the future look like after we sort of get past this messy middle of automating the rote work?
Yeah, so in a lot of these, in compliance and customer success, they're actually they almost seem like they're opposite ends of the spectrum, but they're all share the same paradigm of different layers of handling of an item. So in customer success, if you reached out to someone, you'll probably get hit with their L1 team, their layer 1 team of customer success analysts or support team. Those people can handle about 80 to 90% of the routine customer requests that are coming in. And if they can't handle it, the 10 or 20% gets escalated up to a layer 2 customer success team. I draw that example because it exists in pretty much every or many operationally heavy parts of financial services. It's the same with our world of anti-money laundering. If an L1 analyst cannot handle the task, they'll escalate it up to the L2. Why do I spell that out? It's because we're currently in the process of automating the L1. Can't do end-to-end to it right now. I think give the industry 3, maybe 4 years to do the full automation of that L1 work. That unlocks a lot of resources for more complicated work and more proactive work, which we're really excited about. And ultimately, we'll probably redeploy some of those resources towards either L2 functions, which are more complicated investigations or complicated work, or into a more proactive measures like policy or regulatory relationships. And so I think that's the trend that we're seeing. If we fast forward 5 years, I think we'll see even that L2 start to get automated a little bit more. Again, what is this doing? And the same thing in the L1 layer. They're creating more operational efficiency, unlocking resources from some of this repetitive work, and ultimately redeploying those resources. My strong belief is that the operational teams are the ones that can feel the change of generative AI the most, and these often sit in the back office, not necessarily the front office. Maybe it's a hot take, especially I see a lot of the teams out here. I think AI for the front office is still going to be very much focused on the supervised machine learning that we've seen in the past, predictions, trading, execution. Language models are not that good at those types of things. I wouldn't trust a ChatGPT to make trades. I don't think that's the right use of that technology, and it wasn't meant for that. It's really good at doing operational tasks, which is why we'll see the deployment on the back office.
That's super interesting. I think you mentioned, you give us like this nice little time frame. I think a lot of us here have been reading articles in the Wall Street Journal and other places, obviously Benzinga too, but about how there's a massive gap between the expectations of what organizations are expecting from AI products and what the reality is. So what is the chasm there? Like, what's happening?
It's a really good question, and I think it's the chasm is created from the first products that they're using. Most organizations we speak to, their first Gen AI product is like Microsoft Copilot or something that came from Salesforce. And while those are good, they're almost definitionally broad. They're vague claims around productivity improvements, and that's a really hard thing to measure. Our entire team is using GitHub Copilot. That's great, but I can't tell you how much more effective that's making our engineering team. And when you have a use case, your first deployment is on a fairly vague use case with unproven ROI, it makes it challenging to continue to do that, to invest in those initiatives. I would certainly be skeptical myself. And so what we've tried to do is really try and do AI with ROI in a fast time frame. We always start with a very small use case that they can deploy in about a month and a half, and shows tangible benefits in the forms of cost efficiency gains, quality improvement of handling, or just better consistency of handling of the cases that we do. So to answer your question, I think this chasm is created because often we're starting with these very broad products that have a pretty unspecific claim of generating more productivity for your team. Where we need to go as an industry is adopting things that solve a targeted problem, something that is tangible, and something where there's a time frame for ROI, where you can look back in 2 months and say, did we hit our goal? Otherwise, we're going to be stuck in this chasm of proof of concepts for a very long time.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Back to the time frame, because I'd love to hear a little bit more about, when can we see a lot of these efficiencies? I think already we're seeing it on the cost center side, but where, are we going to see mass Gen AI adoption in banking in 2 to 3 years, or is it going to be 5 years or 10 years? And we'd love to hear a little bit more about your thought process there.
Yeah, I think I'll share a very opinionated view here. Is if we use Gen AI in the back office, what that's going to unlock is capacity to do more new initiatives. I'll give you a really clean example. When I was working at Facebook Financial, we would do international market launches for new products. So we do peer-to-peer payments. For example, I can send you money on WhatsApp or Messenger. Every time we want to launch into a new market, we need a new compliance infrastructure to do so. Right? Handle the operational load, handle fraud, handle chargebacks, things like that. Now, what if you could solve for that and you can scale up with the amount of users you're using because you use an automated system instead of bodies? You would just go into new markets faster. So my perspective on how revenue will be generated through these generative AI initiatives is by automating the back office, you'll allow more market expansion, more product launches from the front office, essentially, to allow you to generate revenue on that side. Again, I'm not optimistic that we'll use Gen AI traders to do own our trading flows. I don't think that's a good use case. It's going to just unlock capacity to do new initiatives. The time horizon for that is not 5 years. I think we're going to see that in the next 2 to 3 years. 10 years out, I think we're going to see different staffing models for back office staffing. Today, the dominant model is you hire people or use some outsourced bodies somewhere in the world to do the key operational workflows. We're excited to be pioneering a third kind of category here. We call it the AI managed service. So rather than using a managed service for like customer success or compliance, you use an AI managed service that ramps up or down with your volumes to make sure that you can handle the workload that's coming up, regardless of what time of year it is or what products you've just launched.
And it's super interesting from a sales process. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's something that the banks and institutions are already very familiar with, right? So you're not selling them something brand new, right? You're selling them something that they're familiar with, but also is much more tech-enabled, much more optimized for their needs.
Right, and I think in our space of compliance, the status quo is just not working. Financial institutions, it seems like every week or every couple of days are getting fined for non-compliance because they have these large backlogs that have been accrued. You probably have all seen the multi-billion-dollar fine for TD related to anti-money laundering that dropped about a month ago. If you dig into that, it was a lot of controls were missing or unstaffed. You fast forward, rewind a year ago, we had large fintech companies getting multi-hundred-million-dollar fines. So the status quo is just simply not working because there's a real gap in the amount of capacity we're putting at these problems. So teams are really looking for ways to fill that gap now, and regulators are very active. And so I go back to this point, it's not a question of, should I invest in it? It's like, how am I going to solve this capacity gap? And you can hire more people, but we don't have budgets like we used to have in 2021, 2022. Or you can use some new technology to introduce automation as opposed to throwing more bodies at the problem.
I think we are coming up pretty close on time. And I'd love to hear, Will is one of the few people that I know that is deeply experienced in compliance and AI and crypto. So I'd love to hear your perspective on, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your crypto background as well. But I'd love to hear your perspective on AI agents and crypto and stablecoins. I think I've been reading a lot about that too recently, so I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, we were just talking about this one backstage. It's a really funny topic. So I used to work at a company called Paxos, which is an NYDFS regulated trust company that also issues stablecoins. I'm extremely strong believer in stablecoins as another payment rails that allow us to actually have more easy global trade and more efficient global trade. That said, I've heard a lot of the pitch for let's say wallets for agents or stablecoins for agents. I just don't think we're there yet. More from a regulatory framework. Agents are going to, in the short term, be operating on behalf of someone. And as you know, you're going to need to KYC someone to facilitate money movement. So if an agent was working on my behalf, I would assume I'm still going to be KYC'd. And it's going to be my wallet on the line. I don't believe you'll have truly autonomous agents for a long time that actually handle payments and stablecoins. But in the 5-year time horizon, who really knows? As we have already seen, smart contracts are a light version of agents. They don't rely on people to interact, to release or receive money. So I think we'll just see better evolutions of that. There have more conditional logic in place to do more complex operations or trades.
That's a great point. That's a great point. And then just to wrap things up, would love to, what's the biggest takeaway that you can share with everyone for the next 12 months about, Gen AI and banking?
Yeah, I think really the opportunity right now, as it currently sits in the next year or two, is how do we get more efficiency out of our operation? I don't think we're in the mode right now. We're deploying it for revenue generation. And so as you go back to your organizations and you're thinking about how do I get more efficiency, how do I do more with less, how do I grow faster without simply throwing more bodies at the problem, look to the spots where you have large headcounts doing repetitive work. That work can either be done by leveraging a partner like a Greenlight, or you can also build a lot in-house. We're huge advocates for building LLM-based workflows in-house to automate your company's specific processes. So I think it's not a far-off horizon. Don't think about it too far as this 10-year horizon. It's really you can start to use that automation today to unlock pretty meaningful efficiencies wherever you see large bodies collected in your organization.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Will. Really appreciate it. And where can everyone find more info about Greenlight?
Yeah, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Happy to chat through any parts of your AI strategy or compliance strategy, or feel free to get me after this panel.
Thanks, everyone.